Hi, welcome to this presentation on context clues. I'm going to apologize, I'm not sure, I can't get it to go any bigger. I'm having some technical difficulties. So hopefully you can see this, and if you can play it on full screen, hopefully you'll be able to see what's written on each of these slides. So a little bit about context clues. This is a presentation that is meant to help you to quickly identify and define words that you come across in your textbooks that you may not have an immediate knowledge of the definition of. For example, if you're coming across you're reading and you come across a word that you don't know in your history or biology or psychology books, it's not always helpful to run to the dictionary every time you have a word that you can't define, because it takes a lot of time and it interrupts the concentration that you have when you're reading. And so it can be very helpful to be able to figure out words based on context clues. And authors will a lot of times use context clues to help you figure out the meanings of unknown words. And there's a couple of different types. And so the first one of those types is the synonym type. Second is contrast or antonym. Third type is example. Fourth type is explanation. And then the sixth type is the situation or the definition. Definition is most commonly used in your textbook. So we'll talk about each one of these specifically, starting with synonyms. So synonyms, if you know the definition of the word synonym, it's a word that has a meaning that's similar to the one that you don't know. For example, if I said timid and shy, those are synonyms because they mean the same thing. So synonyms are words that mean the same thing as the word that the reader doesn't know. And a lot of times these are set off in textbooks anyway by commas, by dashes, or by parentheses. For example, there are a couple of examples here. One of the most important ways we organize elements in our perception is in terms of proximity or closeness. And from that sentence, we can understand then that proximity, the word that's in italics here, means the same thing as closeness. We have the comma, and it gives us another name for proximity, gives us the word or, closeness. The other example, your summary was pithy, and in parentheses, we have short but to the point. This is the definition of pithy, short, to the point. All right, so synonym. We have compunction. I felt no compunction. Hyphen the word regret. Compunction and regret are synonyms. And so I felt no regret about being late for class since I had a good excuse. And a lot of times these synonym clues are placed in textbooks because they will give you the bolded word, and then right after that they will provide a definition. So that is a synonym clue. If you know synonym and antonym, you'll know that antonym then is opposite. So, or we also call these contrast clues. And so antonyms are words that mean the opposite of an unfamiliar word. And there's going to probably be some signal words in there. And notice these are the same signal words that you'll come across when you have a compare contrast organization. So we see words like but, although, despite, however. And so then we can look at our examples. Our underlined word or our italicized word over here is somatic. So it says sometimes our emotions are caused by our mental state, whereas, so here's our contrast words, at other times they are controlled by somatic conditions. So we can make a guess. It's giving us a contrast. It's setting up two different options, mental state or somatic. So we know that those are two opposites. Somatic is one thing, mental is the other. So we have to figure out what is the opposite of mental. Probably bodily or physical would be a good guess there. The second example, although you are poor, you are really from an affluent family. So we see the word although, which signals contrast. So although you are poor, you are from an affluent family. So we set up two different contrast. We have poor on one side, so we have to figure out what affluent means on the opposite, and that means wealthy, right? So the opposite of poor is wealthy. So although you're poor, you come from a really rich family. The last example, we have the word loquacious. It says you are quite loquacious at the party, even though you are not very talkative right now. So again, we have the word even though, which sets up a contrast. On one hand, we have loquacious. On the other hand, we have talkative. What's the opposite of talkative? That would be loquacious. Not very talkative. I'm sorry. Let me say that again. We have loquacious on one side, not very talkative on the other. So we know that loquacious means talkative because the opposite of not very talkative is talkative. So those are antonym clues. We also will have example clues, which here you get an example of a word. So if I were to say, and this is an example I'm making up, not on this slide, but if I were to say that the desert was arid, some examples of arid places would be the Sahara Desert, the Mojave Desert, and the desert of Saudi Arabia. So I just gave you 3 examples of arid places, deserts, so you can maybe figure out that arid means dry, no rain, etc. I also used the word desert, so maybe that helped you out. Here's another example. Some motives are unlearned and are common to every animal, including humans. These motives are called primary drives. Primary drives, such as hunger, thirst, and sex, are strongly influenced by stimuli from within the body. So here, you use the word such as, that's our cue word, and then it lists all those primary drives. From that list, we might be able to come up with a definition of what primary drive is. Same thing is true for visceral responses. I don't know what those are, but I get a for example. Then it gives me 2 examples, increases in heart rate and perspiration, also accompany emotion. So in giving me an example, it helps to provide me with a definition. Explanation clues are those clues that hint at the meaning of a word by way of explanation. For example, kind of a cause and effect in this example. The man felt despondent because he had lost his home in a fire. So using your inferential clues or your inferences or what you already know, how would you feel if you lost your home in a fire? You're probably not excited. You're probably not jumping up and down. You're not happy. But despondent probably means sad, distant, perhaps, quiet. The next example says in the 1920s, Walter Cannon outlined the first scientific description of the way animals and humans respond to danger. He found that a sequence of activities is triggered in the nerves and glands to prepare the body to either defend itself and struggle or to run away to safety. Cannon called this dual stress response the fight or flight syndrome. And fight or flight, as you notice here, is what's in italics. So that's the thing that's not defined or not explained, except that they do explain, starting with this he. It's triggered by nerves and glands to prepare to either defend or run away. So this is our definition, our explanation of this particular word. Third example, another concept in Maslow's theory is the power of transcendence. No idea what transcendence means, but I bet it's going to explain it to me in the next couple of sentences. The key factor in achieving joy is striving towards something higher. This endeavor is not satisfied merely by belonging to a church or joining activist efforts, but must involve meaningful faith that is based on community support, purpose, and hope. And again, rather than just a definition, it gives me an entire explanation. Moving on to situation clues, you may run across a word that has multiple meanings depending on its situation. For example, the word run. We have 4 examples. The man hit a home run. That's one use of the word run. Versus this one, the car has run out of gas. Another meaning of the word run. Versus the third one, run home fast or you will be late for dinner. And number 4, it looks like you have a run in your stocking. All 4 of those sentences use the word run, but in very different situations, right? So the word run means something different in different situations. You may run across this when you're looking at content-specific vocabulary. Different words have different meanings in different contexts. And so once you understand that, you can kind of put on that lens or that way of seeing. And so You know, if it's a scientific word, it might mean something in that context than it does in a different context. And lastly, lots of times in textbooks, you'll have definition clues. These look very similar to those synonym clues that were mentioned before. But sometimes the textbook will come right out and say, here's the definition of this word. For example, it talks about drive, and it gives me the definition right here. It's a state of tension, arousal, or activation. Then there's secondary drives, and a primary drive also gives me those definitions as well. So those are all the different types of context clues that you might run into. As you can imagine, this is a pretty helpful skill for you to learn, because it's going to help you to not have to run to the dictionary when words are unknown to you.